well-regulated militia be necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. Glad you're with me on the program today. We're going to be talking with Adam Kraut, Executive Director of the Second Amendment Foundation, here in just a couple of minutes. Focusing on a couple of the latest legal efforts on the part of the Second Amendment Foundation. But I also want to ask Adam what his thoughts are on the post-Bruen legal environment that we are seeing around the country, including a very, very interesting declaration from a Second Circuit panel. We'll get to that here in just a minute. Before we do, however, let's talk about this for just a moment. Joe Biden's America. It is crushing us. You've got companies laying off tens of thousands of workers, one after the other. Americans working two jobs just to get by. Inflation pushing hardworking families to the brink, as you well know. And a digital dollar could be coming down the pipeline to completely destroy our way of life. The truth is, you need a plan. You know it, and I know it. And that's why you should call Goldco. So you can diversify your savings and investments with gold and silver before things get worse. They're a six-time Inc. 5000 winner, 2022 Company of the Year, with thousands of five-star reviews. And they've helped people like you and me place over $1 billion in gold and silver. Right now, they're offering up to $10,000 in free silver while supplies last. And if you call them today, qualified callers will get a free Ronald Reagan half-ounce silver coin. So don't wait. Call Goldco at 855-412-3806 today. That's 855-412-3806. And now, let's turn our attention to our conversation with Adam Kraut, the Executive Director of the Second Amendment Foundation. SAF busy from coast to coast, more than 50 active lawsuits right now. We're not going to be able to talk about all of them, but we are going to highlight a couple of the latest litigation efforts on the part of the Second Amendment Foundation. Take a look and a listen. Adam, thanks so much for coming on the show, sir. It's good to talk with you today.
Yeah, nice to see you, Cam.
Absolutely. And listen, there's so much to talk about. We could spend all day, literally all day, talking about the dozens of cases that Second Amendment Foundation is involved with around the country. But I want to kind of talk about some of the most recent ones, including this really interesting case involving public housing. Because I honestly, Adam, I kind of thought that this was a settled issue for the most part. But no, we're still seeing these housing authorities, the latest in New York State, tell its residents, if you live here, you've got to give up your right to keep and bear arms.
Yeah, so the Second Amendment Foundation, this is actually our fourth case on this issue. We had another one of these last year down in Tennessee. Before that, we had two up in Illinois, one of which is even cited in our complaint because the language is, I believe, verbatim the same as it was in this particular case. And what's kind of really interesting about this, we're at this point, close to 15 years post Heller, handgun in the home for self-defense, certainly individual right. And yet you still have government entities that are saying, well, no, not here. Publicly funded government aid entities for that matter too. So this case, it's unfortunate we even had to bring it. One of the plaintiffs had written, to the attorney for the housing authority, and they basically came back and said, too bad, so sad, we're not changing our policy, despite even being shown that another housing agency with this exact language had entered into, a stipulated judgment against them and a permanent injunction. So, we, after chatting with him and a couple other tenants, brought this lawsuit on their behalf to vindicate their rights. Just because they accept public funds for housing doesn't mean that they should lose their right to self-defense and keep and bear arms.
Absolutely. Do you know, have any of these housing authorities successfully defended these policies?
I'm unaware of any that have actually successfully done it. I'm aware of, including our cases, I'm aware of 4 public housing cases where they've all lost. I believe one was the Tennessee one was in state court. The other 2 up in Illinois were federal. And I believe the one that challenged the Wilmington Housing Authority down in Delaware, I believe that was a state case as well, if memory serves. So I haven't seen a court yet uphold the housing agency's policy on this, and I just can't imagine why they would want to even fight this.
I guess because they truly don't want their residents exercising their Second Amendment rights. That's the only thing I can think of, because you're right. I mean, this is it's a stinker of a legal argument that, just because, we take government funds, we can deny our residents their inherent civil rights. What other civil liberties would you sacrifice or give up if you live in subsidized housing?
Oh, I'm unaware of any that are, constitutionally enumerated, so they don't certainly don't lose their right to free speech or, search and seizure. So it's kind of mind-boggling that they've taken this position and that they want to, go through the process of expending the funds to defend such an indefensible position.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you're taking the fight to them. This is in New York. We also saw recently Second Circuit 3-judge panel. The panel we didn't get everything we wanted. In fact, I think we didn't get a lot of what we wanted. They did say that yes, the injunction against the sort of the vampire rule, right? Gun owners can't come inside a property unless it's been posted that they're allowed. That can be stare. That injunction can remain in effect. A couple of other provisions of New York's concealed carry laws, but for the most part, the Second Circuit panel upheld a lot of these sensitive places and a lot of these restrictions on, basically good moral character when you're applying for a carry license, which is an arbitrary determination. And I was really concerned, Adam, when I saw this. Matthew Placken, the Attorney General from New Jersey, cited the Second Circuit. He's asking the Third Circuit to basically follow suit and to allow for enforcement of New Jersey's post-Bruen carry laws. And he said that, among other points, the panel cautioned against putting too much stock in the lack of, quote, positive legislation from a particular place, which Placken says noted may well reflect a, quote, lack of political demand rather than constitutional limitations. The panel also noted that evidence that some jurisdictions actually attempted to enact analogous regulations that were rejected on constitutional grounds is more probative, and a lack of such constitutional disputes suggests that the restriction's permissibility was settled. This, I got to tell you, Adam, this seems to me a very, very dangerous road that the Second Circuit is going down, because the Supreme Court said in Bruen that the test is the text of the Second Amendment and then the history and the tradition of the right to keep and bear arms. And again, we're talking about a national tradition, right? So, a couple of territorial laws or a couple of local ordinances is not evidence of a long-standing national tradition. And here you have the Second Circuit say, well, just because there aren't any historical analogs for the state of New York to point to, that's okay. We can still say that these sensitive places are allowed. We can still say that these good moral character clauses are acceptable, even if there's no historic analog. Isn't this just a flat-out rejection or a rewriting of the Bruen test?
It sure seemingly is a way that they're just trying to skirt what the Supreme Court has said, again, for this time, however many times they've said it in the past, because the test that came out of Bruen was really what Heller said. And the court came back finally and said, we told you, and they reiterated it several times. The court also said that the lack of laws, analogous or verbatim copies that existed at the time, if that issue was something that was dealt with, and certainly people were violent throughout history, and that, restrictions on other things did exist, that's probative that, it was considered and settled that these laws, don't comport with the constitutional requirements that the Second Amendment demands. So I think it's judges trying to be clever with ways that they can help assist the states uphold their new laws that they've implemented. I mean, you look at particularly the sensitive places laws that were enacted post-Bruen. A lot of these we've never seen before in any context, prior to even with the restrictive permitting regimes, the people that were able to actually acquire permits never had these restrictions. So all of a sudden to say that, oh yeah, all these places are now off limits and this comports with the nation's history and tradition is just, it's a interesting case study in how to potentially ignore what the Supreme Court says. And it's going to draw the ire of the Supreme Court because they clearly said what they meant more than once.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we've seen the court take a hands-off approach to these emergency appeals to date, and it's been frustrating to watch. I don't think that it is indicative of where the court actually stands on these issues, but it is frustrating that, they have not intervened at early stages of the case. But, maybe when you see flagrant rewriting of the Supreme Court's decisions like what we're seeing from the Second Circuit, maybe that will prod the Supreme Court to say, all right, you know what, it is time for us to step in and set things right.
Yeah, the Supreme Court is an interesting animal. I mean, there's plenty of people that study it and try to articulate the reasons why it does or doesn't do something. But one of the very basic premises is just from a procedural posture of where the case is in its trajectory. These are preliminary injunctions that have gone up on appeal. They're not decided on the merits, the underlying facts and issues of the case. And a lot of the time, the court wants that to be settled by the lower courts, although the way they rule on these is usually indicative of how they'd rule on the merits anyway. The other thing is that, there's currently sensitive places cases in 3, maybe 4 circuits off the top of my head. You have the Third Circuit with New Jersey, you have the Second Circuit with New York, you have the Ninth Circuit with California. And so, they also like to allow the circuits to kind of figure it out on their own. It might create a split where one circuit says, yes, this is permissible, another says no. And then the Supreme Court comes in and levels the playing field and sets it back to square one that, this is the law of the land and you all need to abide by this, which is exactly what we saw with Bruen.
No, that's true. And you're right. We do have this going on in multiple circuit courts of appeals in various stages of a litigation as well. But, sooner rather than later, hopefully one of these cases will get the court's attention. We talked about the public housing case, but what are some of the areas, and I'll talk about generally the areas of litigation that you're looking at? Obviously, you've got a finite amount of resources of the Second Amendment Foundation. Can't accept every case or challenge every law immediately. So when you're looking at, okay, these are the cases that we need to pursue, what's guiding you right now, Adam?
So there's really 2 tracks of cases that we look at. There's the strategic litigation where we sit down and we look at the law of the land right now and where things are and how we can attempt to alter that landscape for a positive result for the Second Amendment. So you'll see that with, all the assault weapons ban cases, the magazine capacity restrictions, the 18 to 20 challenges, and now the sensitive places ones being very, very clear examples of that. And then there's opportunistic stuff that, somebody comes through the door, we look at what their circumstances are, we see that there is a tangible public benefit to pursuing that on their behalf. It's not simply just helping them in a situation, but there's a broader public good, and might not be within the plan, but there's an opportunity and there's the resources available. And we look at what the positive upshot is and decide that, we'll take that case now. So it's kind of split between those. It's, right now it's going to be interesting to see what the court does with the assault weapons stuff, with the sensitive places. I suspect that will run back up to the Supreme Court at some point. The permitting is another one that there was language in Bruen about that you're seeing jurisdictions do stuff in. For instance, we filed a lawsuit last week in California challenging the LA County Sheriff's Department's delay in processing permits. They were, I think, between a year and a year and a half. There was also a local PD where their fees were in excess of $1,000 to acquire a permit. So that certainly fits within what the Supreme Court kind of cautioned about as far as excessive fees. There's a bill that goes into effect in California this coming January for the jurisdictions that require a psych evaluation, that the entire cost of that is now on the applicant. It used to be capped at $150, which is still quite a bit of money. I'm from Pennsylvania. I mean, where I'm from, to get a carry permit, it's $20. You walk into the sheriff's office, you fill out the application. We're point of contact states, run it for PICS, it pings NICS, and assuming you're not disqualified, you walk out the door with your permit. So it's sad that these other jurisdictions have imposed all these requirements, and not only the loopholes that people have to jump through to get one, but also the amount of money that somebody needs to expend, and then the time on top of that. Take off work, go here for an evaluation, apply here, it takes an hour, and for a lot of people that's just prohibitive from even being able to pursue it.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, in Virginia, it's not $20. I wish it was $20, but I think it's $50 for me to get my carry license. So it's still, it's not 4 figures like Laverne, California is charging, or a lot of these other jurisdictions. Yeah. It's not taking. Last time I had to apply, it was about 3 weeks before I got my permit. Unlike Los Angeles County, where it's 18 months or at least a year, and as long as 18 months. One of the other aspects, we were talking with Chuck Michelle about this lawsuit last week. One of the other aspects that I think is really important about that case is one of the plaintiffs doesn't live in California. He's a Florida resident, right? Who would like to be able to, he's a legal gun owner. He can carry in Florida, but he can't carry in California because no out-of-state residents can carry in Florida. There's no way for you or for I to carry in California legally because our permits aren't recognized and California doesn't have a non-resident permit process. To the best of my knowledge, Adam, this is the first case that really argues our right to keep and bear arms should not end at the state line, right? This is the first real case that gets into how do other states get to regulate our right to carry?
Yeah, I'd be lying to you if I told you I was aware of another challenge on that exact issue. It's certainly something that does need to be resolved. California has, as you pointed out, erected a complete barrier to it. Not only will we not recognize your state's permits, regardless of the trading requirements, but we won't even allow you to apply for our permit. And I think that that's something that the courts are going to have to grapple with. And I don't see how they, arrive at any other conclusion other than, yes, there needs to be one pathway. Not sure it matters which pathway, but either you need to allow people to apply for non-resident permits or you need to recognize out-of-state permits. And we could really get into the weeds into that discussion as to, okay, if we're going to recognize other permits, do they need to have the exact trading requirements or something substantially similar? And that was, prior to Bruen, a lot of times that's exactly how some states did in fact look at it. Your requirements are similar to ours, so we'll recognize yours, or you don't have any trading, so we're not going to recognize yours, but we do have a non-resident permit you can apply for, things like that.
Yeah. Well, and again, I mean, all of this hopefully gets fleshed out. It would be nice if we actually had people on the other side who recognize that we are talking about a fundamental civil right, but I guess we're going to have to keep litigating until they get it through their skulls that is in fact what we're talking about. That is in fact what they're infringing on. And that's why groups like the Second Amendment Foundation won't stop fighting until this right is strong and secure.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it is not a fast process. That is the sad part about it. And I always try to caution people that just because a lawsuit was filed doesn't mean you're going to see results immediately. Sometimes you get a good pathway and you get a good preliminary injunction that stands, and you do get results immediately. And other times it can take years to deal with that stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, I think Bruen's a perfect example of this, right? I mean, Bruen wasn't even really the first case that we were hoping would be a vehicle for right to carry. I mean, you can go all the way back to Peruta in California, right? And then the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus New York City, which was mooted when New York City changed its rules. So, yeah, the fight to get justice here, you're right. It's not quick. It's certainly not easy. But, it is not only critically important. We're winning. We're seeing these victories, and we can talk about the desperation of these activist judges to try to uphold some of these gun control laws. But I will say, I think in the post-Bruen environment, we are seeing some successes that we would not have otherwise. Do you agree?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And when you see judges that are appointed by Democratic presidents, usually there's an inference that they are a liberal judge. Sometimes there's horse trading that goes on in the Senate and, a Democrat will appoint a Republican for something else. But when you see judges that are appointed by Democratic presidents ruling in favor of, the plaintiff and validating that there is a Second Amendment right on things that you never would have thought prior to Bruen would have ever been a thing, I would say it's safe to say that, a lot of good has come out of Bruen. And, some of the courts are trying to inject and muddy the waters with, what the Second Circuit just did as to, okay, well, how can we take something that's clear and make it so that there's some room to wiggle around in again? And I think you're just always going to kind of see that gamesmanship, unfortunately, to some extent.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, listen, Adam, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. I really appreciate it. Look forward to doing this again very soon. And of course, if folks want more information about what Second Amendment Foundation is doing, if they want to get involved in the fight themselves, saf.org is the website. And thank you for all of your activism, Adam, really.
Yeah, well, thank you. And it was great to be here. And I look forward to joining you again, Cam.
Me too. We'll talk again soon. Adam Kraut joined us from the Second Amendment Foundation here on Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My thanks to Adam for joining us on the program today. Looking forward to welcoming him back again in the very near future. Right now, let's turn our attention to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report. We will start there with a case out of Joplin, Missouri, where a suspended sentence, actually more than one, has been granted in a home invasion and robbery case. Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty serious crime, right? 35-year-old man pleaded guilty this week to 2 of the 5 felony counts he was facing in this home invasion robbery. And Ricky Cook of Joplin, Missouri, was granted suspended sentences and probation. in lieu of prison time. Jasper County Circuit Courts, where this all took place. Cook was originally charged with first-degree robbery, armed criminal action, resisting arrest, and stealing, as well as a misdemeanor count of assault. He ended up taking a guilty plea to one count of first-degree burglary, one count of stealing, and the felony counts of first-degree burglary, armed criminal action, resisting arrest, as well as the misdemeanor charge, all dismissed. The judge accepting the plea bargain and assessing Cook 7 years on each conviction. So, again, I mean, if these sentences have been ordered to be served consecutively, we're looking at 14 years concurrently, which is more common. Still looking at 7 years with, time off for good behavior, probably more like 3.5 to 4 years behind bars. But none of that's going to happen because the judge said, 7 years, but we're going to suspend all 7. Instead, we're going to place you on supervised probation for 5 years. So, and 75 hours of community service. Can't forget that, right? And if you don't abide by the terms of your probation, then theoretically we could sentence you to the original 7 years, but that rarely, if ever, happens. So the facts of this case, October 10th of last year, Cook unlawfully entered a home in Joplin, armed with a handgun, threatened to shoot a victim if he did not comply with his demands. He then stole some coins, cash, personal checks, and clothing. Joplin police tried to stop a motorcyclist whose clothing matched the description of the suspect. He ended up fleeing, but was taken into custody when his motorcycle broke down. The motorcyclist, identified as the defendant in this case, in possession of a coat that had been taken from Kirby, the victim in this case. Mr. Cook, Ricky Cook, the suspect here, had also pleaded guilty last month, November 6th, to counts of vehicle tampering and possession of a controlled substance from an arrest in 2020, as well as unlawful possession of a firearm and possession of a controlled substance from a arrest about a week later in 2020 as well. The judge ordered the sentences that Cook was assessed on Monday run concurrently with the suspended sentences that he received in the 2020 cases. That's right. So this is not even his first go-around with the court system. Previous felony convictions and suspended sentences, that time increased criminal activity. Now you're up to a home invasion and a robbery, still a suspended sentence. You got to ask the question, what the hell does it take to actually be sentenced to prison in the show me state of Missouri these days? All right, on to today's armed citizen story. In South Carolina, where police say a shooting in a restaurant parking lot was an act of self-defense. No charges will be filed. I don't have a lot of details about this. This happened in Hendersonville. I apologize. I said this was South Carolina. This actually is North Carolina, but southern North Carolina, near the border. South Carolina media reporting on this story. But the Hendersonville, North Carolina Police Department said on Tuesday that a shooting back on November 24th, in which a 30-year-old from Asheville, North Carolina, Elijah Edward Timmons, was shot and killed. No charges will be filed in this case. Police say the shooting was an act of self-defense. Happened just after 2:30 in the morning in the parking lot of the Orchard Bar and Grill at Henderson Crossing. Officers found Timmons with a gunshot wound to the head. A gun at the scene, also believed to belong to Timmons, was found. According to police at the time, Timmons was engaged in an altercation with a suspect before he was fatally shot. But again, now police say that the suspect was actually the victim who is acting in self-defense. Finally today, our good deed of the day, in the right place, at the right time, unable to do the right thing. I'm going to take a little issue, just a minor issue with the headline here. Firefighters' family dog saved 9 from burning Atlanta apartments. I don't have an issue with the firefighters being credited. I guess I don't really even have an issue with the dog being credited, but the dog can't talk. The dog can bark. The dog can alert its owners, hey, there's something going on. But it was actually the owners of the dog who ended up going door to door through this apartment complex, warning people that there was a fire. This happened at the Terrace Complex in Atlanta, Georgia, just before 2 a.m. This morning. So apparently this just a few hours ago. Susan Davis lives in the building. She says she was sleeping when her neighbor warned her about the fire. She said, I woke up by people hollering, fire, fire, smoke, smoke, let's go. She said, I started out the front door, smoke, and then the flames hit. I had to back up, go through the back door. Some of her neighbors were not as lucky. Folks on the higher levels found themselves with nowhere to go, unable to escape the flames. Firefighters say when they showed up on scene, there was a pregnant woman and 3 small children who were hanging out of an upstairs window screaming for help. Firefighters were able to rescue them, and then they realized that there were more victims in the back of the building. They found 5 adults trapped on a balcony. They were also brought to the ground safely. And neighbors say that, again, that they were first alerted that something was wrong by a family dog named Summer. Summer started barking, woke up her family, and then the family went around warning the other residents. Davis says the dog let us know. She let us know that there was smoke in the house. Well, yeah, the dog, again, and its owners. Let's not forget the humans involved here. Very glad that Summer, started barking. Hope that Summer gets a big treat, but in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing are Summer's owners, who rather than just fleeing to safety themselves, again, took the time to warn their neighbors that they too needed to flee the scene. Glad that everybody was able to make it out safe and sound. Thanks again to the quick thinking of, yes, Summer the dog, but its owners and the firefighters who arrived on scene as well. So we, again, tip of the cap to the owners there, and hopefully Summer gets some steak tonight. That is going to do it for this edition of Bruen Arms Cam & Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program as always. Looking forward to seeing you back here again tomorrow as we continue discussing the latest Second Amendment news and information from all across the nation. Of course, you don't have to wait until tomorrow's Cam & Company. Just go to BruenArms.com. We are constantly updating the website with the latest 2A information that you need to know about. And if you like what you see, I'd encourage you to become a VIP or VIP Gold member. Actually doing, well, by the time you see this, I will have done this week's VIP Gold live chat with Hot Air's Ed Morrissey. But we do it every Wednesday. Would love for you to be a part of it as well. All you have to do, go to BruenArms.com/subscribe. Use the promo code GUNRIGHTS. You can get a significant savings on your VIP or VIP Gold membership. And as our way of saying thanks for showing your support, we're going to give you exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, like the live chat that we do every week with Ed Morrissey, but also daily content as well. News stories, analysis you won't find anywhere else, because your support really does matter. It truly makes a difference. So thank you again. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Until then, be well, be safe, and be free.